everybody. Keith Engle here for TGI Sports Talks Major League Baseball Update. Welcome, everybody, on, TGI Sports Talk. Let's talk sports. If you see us on other venues, welcome. If you don't see us live, a lot of you will see us in Memorex. So see how old you guys are today. But we welcome you today, and I'll be joined by our special collaborator. I gave him a new title today, Drew Ehrlich, in just a second. We'll dive into everything around Major League Baseball, the news that's fit to print. Lots of news. Kill this music. Big news about Ohtani. Will this cost him hundreds of millions of dollars? I doubt it myself, but we'll see. I want to talk a little bit about Steven Strasburg and what could have been there. Speaking of what could have been, the Mets are retiring the number 16 and number 18. And if you're a Met fan, you know who I'm talking about. Doc and Daryl. What could have been. And some interesting chatter I've heard about Pete Alonso, Yankees youth movement, whatever. We'll jump into all of it and whatever Drew might have on his mind. So let me bring him in without further ado. Almost banned him from the studio here by accident. Good afternoon, Drew. How are you?
Good afternoon. I am fine. Thanks for having me on again.
I found myself hovering over the ban from studio button. I don't know if that was subliminal or I don't know. Something
it could be.
My body.
It could be.
Oh, God. How are you today?
I am doing okay.
Lots to talk about in baseball. We got some hot teams. We got some cold teams. The Yankees do break a streak, but continue another one as they lose another series and to another bad team. Rangers in the tank. Lots to talk about around baseball and some of the things I just chatted about and anything you got on your mind. The big news, I think the biggest news is Ohtani blowing out his elbow, Tommy John surgery for the second time. And how this is going to affect his free agent status, and why is he still playing? Why not have surgery now? Well, unless he's not going to have surgery. Some guys have not had this surgery. Tanaka, for the Yankees, went his almost career basically with a tear. So it's not a full tear. So I don't know. What are your thoughts here on Ohtani?
Well, first we need more info because they just found the tear. We don't know how severe it is. They don't know if he's going to go under the knife or not. It's why they the best example we obviously have now is what's his name? All of a sudden I'm drawing a blank on our baseball player names.
As far as playing with this injury, or
yeah,
well, Tanaka for the Yankees did it for like 8 years.
Yeah, Bryce Harper, though, has come back.
Bryce Harper is a player. Yes. Good point.
And
he also missed a significant amount of time, right?
He did. He missed, less than they thought. He came back in May.
A couple months early.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have, at this point, some sort of a standard in place for hitting with that as far as rather than pitching. So, he's not going to damage it anymore hitting. He doesn't play the outfield, so he's never going to throw a ball. He can, It's weird because he's going to be a free agent. So normally you'd say, well, if he's going under knife, get it done sooner so that he can be ready to hit sooner. I don't know. It's a weird thing.
Why? And even if why play? There's nothing to play for. They're 10.5 games out. They're not in this race. It's over.
Yeah.
I don't
get their money's worth.
Well, from the Angels standpoint, I mean, this might be the last they see of him. So, okay, fine, I get it. But if I'm Ohtani, I mean, there's nothing to be gained. I guess if he DHs, he's not going to hurt it worse, theoretically. But
going for the home run record might be a possibility as to why they're still doing it.
What's he at now?
44, I think.
Well, I guess he's still got a shot at 60, right? 61.
Yeah. I mean, the whole Angel thing, I mean, you and I both said they should have traded him at the deadline. which in hindsight really that's
Been gone.
that's not even 2015. That's 15-15. That was incredible oversight.
Can't even go worse. Couldn't have gone worse than what they did.
I mean, we look absolutely brilliant.
Well,
but
girls, you know,
it had to happen sometime. But you know, okay, it's done. They kept him. They tried to surround him with stuff. They mortgaged their minor leagues, and here they are. So, you know, where do they go from here? I actually think the injury improves their chances of keeping him.
Possibly shorter term, maybe even. But
right. So in that regard, there's a change. I think he's lost some money for the free agency, certainly for next year. And you know, if he's just doing a 1-year contract, extended, we got to see. I mean, Eovaldi has come back. We've got some people that have gone through it.
Oh, this isn't a surgery. I mean, it's almost a common surgery today. And some guys, well, we went through this, I think, 10 years ago, maybe. Where kids were having this surgery preemptively to strengthen their arm, which I think is ridiculous. But I think that practice has been kind of pushed aside a little bit.
Considering how many guys have to do it twice now, I'd say, yeah, that's been disproven.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really seem like if I'm a doctor, I should be operating on a perfectly good arm anyway. But I guess, what do I know? So you don't there's a chance if you're Ohtani, and this significantly impacts. I mean, the talk was 10 years, $500 million. If this significantly impacts that, do you take? I don't think it can be a 1 year because he may miss a significant amount of that 1 year. Do you do a 2-year deal and come back up when you're 31? What's he, 29, I think? I don't know. It's a risk either way.
It is.
You've got to gamble, and the team's got to gamble.
Yeah. Well, the sooner he gets the surgery, the less time he misses, as Bryce Harper's shown. So they still haven't decided if they're doing it yet. So that's half the problem. But so he could do a 1 year.
Hello, Augustin. Good to have you with us today. Sorry.
No, you know, I mean,
like somewhere
500,000, yeah, for a two-way player, but I don't know.
Well, he's not getting 500 million.
Not now. No.
If you're a DH, you're not getting 500 million.
And that's
a big contract,
and that's another excellent point. He doesn't even play the field, so there's no flexibility. So you sign this guy, and there's only one place he can play.
Interesting development. Like I said, the whole thing for the Angels and Ohtani could not have gone worse. I mean, likely he's going to get hurt wherever he goes, right? If he's going to get hurt, he's going to get hurt.
Right.
But the Angels now are really, I mean, you're right. Oddly, maybe they have a better chance of keeping him than they had before. Teams get scared away, but he's too good for teams to get that scared, I think. You know, and this isn't like an injury that's, career ending anymore. So it's a matter of whether he's going to be a pitcher anymore, I think, is probably the question.
There is talk, obviously with the Eovaldi and these other guys coming back. DeGrom's going to be going through it. Someone mentioned the possibility of just stick him in bullpen as a possibility.
Better, though? You're going to pitch. I mean, there you pitch. Theoretically, you pitch more and not even as consistently. That can take more wear on your arm. What's he got to pitch twice a week?
I don't know.
Nice in my bullpen more than that. But.
It's a bad thing. There's no question about it.
And again, it's been a weird week because, and again, I don't think this plays into my whole. And I talked about this morning with the Mad New Yorker, because of Steven Strasburg. Interestingly enough, basically the same day or the next day, announces his retirement after just a career of injuries, basically. And I think he was kind of on the first wave of starting to baby pitchers and pitch counts and no throwing between starts and this, that, and the other thing. And I think he's the perfect example of how to ruin a great career. These guys, by babying and protecting these guys, they're hurting them. I mean, Nolan Ryan threw 5,000 innings. His arm was fine when he retired. He had arm injuries. Everybody has injuries, but babying him does not protect them. And I mean, if Strasburg's career could have been, again, we don't know, but he was certainly, when he was good, he was better than anybody that was playing at the time.
Yep.
DeGrom, you've got all these cautionary tales of how the way you deal with pitchers today is not the right way to do it, but yet nobody changes their approach.
Nope. And every starter is only going to go 5 innings from now on, and it's
makes no sense.
It's not good.
You pay them the most money on your pitching staff, but they don't pitch the important part of the game ever, basically.
Right.
Oh my God! So it's just. Any thoughts on Steven Strasburg and that situation? I mean, he could have been a great pitcher. He was a great pitcher even 4 years ago?
Yeah.
In the World Series.
Well, I mean, again, we talk about how they didn't allow him to play at the end of the year and, ruin their playoff chances.
2012, they could have won a World Series in 2012.
In the meantime, and then they signed him again, knowing that there were issues, and that was money they threw away. Although, didn't he have the thoracic outlet syndrome?
He's had a couple different injuries. That's one of them, yes.
Right.
For sure. And that seems to be, a career ender more than anything today.
Yeah.
We saw it happen to the Dark Matt Harvey, right? And then a few other guys. So we talked about that year they sat him down. 2012, he's 15-6 in 159 innings. He didn't pitch, I believe, after September 8th that year.
Yep.
This team, I think Davey Johnson was a manager, if I'm not mistaken. They could have been a World Series winner that year if they don't shut him down. And they shut him down, he gets hurt anyway the next year. That's my point. These guys, they get hurt anyway, and you're trying to save them from what? Did you see the post they put up about Nolan Ryan? I think I shared it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's or Friday or whatever day, Sunday. But that's a great example. There's a guy, and it's not just him. I mean, he was a bit of a freak of nature, I guess, but Seaver and Jenkins, and there's all these guys who pitched 15, 20 years and through 20 complete games, if not more, a year. And these guys today, they won't complete 20 games. I'd be shocked if every single pitcher pitching today combined for 20 career complete games.
It's a shame. I mean, Ohtani's injury, and now you got Strasburg's careers cut short. We've had a bunch of pitchers' careers cut short. They got to find something. They can't just keep bringing up pitchers and pitching them 5 innings and losing them, 3 years into their career and calling it.
Yeah. I think it would be a shame if Ohtani can't pitch anymore, because I know I always kid Neil, because Neil comes on, he thinks he's this, creation of ESPN. And that was, I think, only because of the debate for the MVP last year myself.
Right.
I don't think Neil doesn't think this guy's a good ball player. He's a great player. He's doing something nobody's ever done. They compare him to Babe Ruth, but Babe Ruth never did what he's doing, which is hit and pitch. Well, pitch and hit on the days you don't pitch. Babe Ruth was a great hitter and a great pitcher, but he didn't do them both at the same time.
He actually did the 2 transition years before they moved him into the outfield.
Yeah.
They did do that, but it was only, year and a half or so.
Well, even if I want to count Babe Ruth, I mean, me and one other guy has done, nobody's ever even approached this. And it'd be a shame if he can't do both going forward, I think.
It would be.
Bad for the thing.
You brought up Davey Johnson, though, so that segues into the next thing.
Again, we've had this conversation. For whatever reason, I always picture you as a Met fan, and you say you're not really a Met fan, but
I used to be.
Well, there you go. So I'm guessing in the 80s, you probably were.
Oh, big time.
And if you haven't seen this, I talk about this all the time. If you haven't seen, oh my God, now I'm not going to remember the name of it. It's an ESPN documentary about the 86 Mets. Once Upon a Time in Queens. It's a great documentary about this team and behind the scenes. It's really interesting. And we talk about this because I believe this weekend, 16 and 18 for Doc and Daryl are getting retired. Great contributors to that team. Also cautionary tales, and they've been, listen, they've certainly gone around now. They're speaking very openly about their troubles and trying to help other people, which is certainly commendable. But I don't think either one of them would deny that they cheated themselves in the game with their own demons, which, it's hard. I don't hold that against them because it's a tough thing. But I mean, Doc, arguably his best 2 years were his first 2 years at 19 and 20 years old. And yes, he came back and pitched okay and at different times, but I'll be honest with you, that's one of the first times I was shocked at somebody that I heard went into rehab in 1987, I think it was. Yeah. I want to say the first time. Because drugs, while they were there, weren't at the forefront. We'd had the Pittsburgh drug trials a couple of years before with some big names like Keith Hernandez from that Met team and Dave Parker and some others, but it wasn't like a daily thing that we heard about again after 87 to 2000 and whatever, or even today, I guess we've heard about it. What are your thoughts about these two guys? Again, great players, great contributors to that team.
Yeah, a lot of mixed feelings because you've got obviously several legacies, including for the Yankees in both cases, especially with a no-hitter. But these guys. We're talking about Strasburg, who may not have been trained properly and therefore his career was cut short. Now we've got two guys whose careers were cut short through their own actions.
Correct.
And that makes it almost tougher in some ways because there's the what could have been, Gooden could have thrown his arm out. Who knows? But
correct.
But in the absence of knowing if something like that could happen, yes, what they did was great while they were with the Mets, but then you always wonder what could they have done afterwards, and how many more titles could the Mets have won. So it's a sort of a love-hate relationship with those two guys.
Yeah, and the lack of winning more, I don't think falls completely on them, although a lot of it does. But that team. I'm sure in 1986, as a Met fan, you thought this team was going to win a bunch of World Series, and that was the only one they won. And they only got to wait a minute, that's the only one they got to. What am I talking about? They got to the NLCS in '88 and lost to the Dodgers. And if you watch this Once Upon a Time in Queens, you'll see a lot of the story. And I had Kevin Mitchell on this show, or my one-on-one show, and Kevin was like, they traded me because they thought I was a bad influence on these guys. It was the other way around.
Right.
And so it was an interesting take on it as well. I mean, do you contribute? Do you think it was just Doc and Darryl? What else caused this team not to win more?
Oh, Johnson was criticized for his loosey-goosey management of the clubhouse.
Yeah.
The inmates running the asylum and all that, and playing games drunk and stoned and all that, and they still won, which tells you something. But yeah, and that surprises me too about Johnson allowing that to happen, because he wasn't that way with all the other teams he managed.
There's a manager, by the way, who does not get his due. I mean, when he got fired by the Mets, he didn't get a job for a long time.
Yeah.
Long time. I think he went to the Orioles after that. All he did was win. Didn't win World Series. I get it. And he loses that job, and Cincinnati, I think, was next. The Dodgers were next. They were Nationals. He won everywhere he went.
Yep.
But I think he's a manager. And I read his book last year, by the way. It's really good. If you haven't read that, I would recommend it as well. I think he gets a bad rap, and I think you're right. I think it goes back to the days with the Mets, and the fact that they didn't win more was held against him. And I think they want to blame him for the Doc and Darryl thing, and I can't blame the manager. These are adults.
Yep, agreed on all counts. I think you nailed it really well.
So, and Kevin Mitchell said the same thing when I had him. I was interested. He also says, by the way, the rumor is that he was in the locker room playing cards and had to put his uniform back on in Game 6 was incorrect. They were not playing cards. He was all ready to go. Believe what you want, I guess. Still one of the great games of all time, though. The 86 game 6. A lot of fun. Baseball should be that way again. But it won't be. Because we'd have a man on second to start extra innings. So,
forever and ever.
Whatever. What else is going on that you want to talk? Pete Alonso. Let's move into today. I know we were talking about a lot about yesterday. I'll talk about Pete Alonso, what the Mets ought to do there. They're considering signing him long term, make him an offer. If he doesn't take it, trade him. What do you think is going to happen here?
Well, the interesting thing there was the rumor that at the trade deadline they had been in talks with the Brewers, apparently, for trading him. What was the phrase? Within a field goal of making a trade?
Which is interesting phrase for a baseball.
Yeah, that was a weird analogy. So it's only a three-pointer rather than a touchdown. I mean, I can see them fielding interest. I mean, you're remiss as a GM if someone approaches you and says, "Hey, what do you want for this guy?" and don't get into a discussion. I mean, you have to. The fact that it was only a field goal, not even an extra point, whatever.
Right.
How serious was it? My guess is not all that serious. You've got an issue, particularly with New York teams. You've got icons. They get icons, and it was right for a while with the Mets at third base. He was their icon, and now you got Alonso as an icon. And when you trade these people, Seaver back in the day when they traded him to Cincinnati, it really it ruins your gate because the fans get pissed off, and you don't see that as much with some teams. No one cared in Milwaukee. They traded Josh Hader.
That's a different. Yeah, I mean, the market you're in matters. Aaron Judge gave more to the Yankees, means more to the Yankees than he gives them on the field. He gives them lots on the field, but he means more to that team, to the brand. Right, that's the same thing with the Mets.
Exactly, and I think Alonso fits that. So, should they trade him? Well, I mean, they tried trading everybody else, and if they got really good value for him, maybe. But I'd say that about absolutely any player. It's nothing about Alonso. The knock against Alonso is that he doesn't hit for average. He takes walks, which is great. He hits home runs. He drives in runs. His fielding's okay. He's not top-level fielding. So really what you're looking at is the power production, the RBI production, and the brand. And how much can you get to replace that is the question.
I mean, when you're not multidimensional, I think it lessens your impact to the brand. He's turned into Dave Kingman in my mind in a way. I mean, that's what I think of when I see him play now.
Well,
maybe without the surly attitude, I guess.
Yeah, he hasn't beat up on anybody or thrown anything.
Rats and people's flashes.
Right. He's also a better fielder. I mean, Kingman was atrocious. And Kingman struck out a lot more than Alonso does. So he was true three outcome before anyone even talked about three outcomes. Was Kingman. So
he had that many walks. Actually, he might have been just two outcomes. I'm not sure about his walk totals.
He walked a decent amount, actually, mostly intentionals because they were afraid of him. But
well, that's a good point.
But yeah,
teams where they didn't have anybody else but him.
Yeah, again, Kingman wasn't a good clubhouse presence either, whereas Alonso is.
Right.
So it's what they refer to as the intangibles that keep a player someplace or trade a player someplace. He's going to want good sized money. Obviously, arbitration can tell you where they fit based on other statistics because that's what they use when they get to that. And I think he'll show up between his fielding and his batting average as he's really good, but he's not Judge.
No.
Who's a better fielder and hits for average, and so
I've seen some stories recently that they may offer him somewhere in the range of $175 million over 5 years, and if he doesn't take it, they're going to move him.
That seems reasonable to me, actually.
So we'll see what happens there. Mets and Yankees, actually, it's interesting. There have been a lot of seasons where they've been lost seasons for both of them in the last 50 years. At least there's been a handful, but it's going to be interesting the direction they both take here in the offseason. Steve Cohen has pointed to the fact that they, are punting next year. I'm not buying that myself.
It depends on your definition of punt.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to sign any big name free agents.
Yeah.
They've already telegraphed what they're going to be doing. They're going to try to be competitive, a la Milwaukee, Kansas City. Use the young people, Orioles. Try to build up, maybe sign a veteran free agent for support, mentorship, etc. And then they're aiming for 25. I mean, they've already pretty much come out and said that. Yankees, I'm not quite sure what they're going to do.
If it's me, I'm tearing it all down. It looks to me like Cashman's going to be safe. I mean, he signed a 4-year extension last year. Hal Steinbrenner has given no indication, and he's a very loyal guy, by the way. He's not his father, which people think that we had this discussion a little bit this morning. They point to that and think he doesn't have the passion that his father had. I just think he lets the baseball people do their jobs, unlike George. He's not there day to day, so you think, oh, he doesn't care. They might sell the team. I don't think the Steinbrenner is selling this team anytime soon. I think Cashman's staying, but based on what Cashman said the other day, if I was Boone, I wouldn't be buying any property.
Yeah.
He did not give him a ringing endorsement, and I think somebody's going to have to pay for this mess, and it's probably going to be Aaron Boone. And they got to get away from the analytical nonsense. I know we have this conversation a lot, but they rely too much on it. I mean, I know you have to, but they rely too much on it, and they also don't have the players that can make it work. Is my problem. And
yeah,
boring and bad at the same time. That's the worst combination you could have in New York. Yeah, that's what we got here now. I don't see any indication the Mets are going to fire Buck, and I wish they would, because I'd like to see him come down. But
there's no guarantee that that's who the Yankees would pick up. They could just as
No,
well go back and get Donnie too.
yeah, well, it's a great point. Donnie, I don't know if Donnie wants to deal with this nonsense. So he might be in play in Toronto. Who knows? I think Snyder's going to be in trouble up there myself.
He's a bench coach. If he wanted out of coaching, he would have been out of coaching. He wouldn't become a bench coach. So
no, I think he's going to be in play for the Blue Jays job, because I think Snyder could be on the block up there with their lack of with their underproducing this year, right?
Relative to expectations, they're not underproducing to a Yankee level, but yes.
Yes, agree. Well, is that even a level? The depth said what it said. Yankees depth. Level indicates a certain height, I think.
You could have low levels, single A,
It's as bad as I've seen they haven't been under 500. That's a remarkable record to begin with. I haven't been under 500 in 30 years. That's a remarkable record to begin with. Well, and I'm just like all other Yankee fans. And I admit it, I'm spoiled, and one World Series win in 20 years isn't good enough for me, even though we compete for championships theoretically every year. And this happens, and maybe it's a slap in the face, and you say, time to reboot everything.
You got to find the pieces that work. You got to find the strategies that work. Their strategies for pitching have not worked. Well, starting pitching.
Yeah.
You can't just keep buying free agents and hoping that they're going to fill it in. You got to develop your own. You got to have a pipeline so that when they get it, not if, when they get injured, you've got a pipeline to fill it in with. You can't just pay a fortune for one ace and then say we'll backfill it with whatever we can find. It hasn't worked, and they've always done that with their starting staff. It's always been free agents.
Yeah,
and they really need to work on their minor league, particularly on the pitching side.
Well, a good point with the pitchers. I mean, it goes back to the late, even when they were winning back-to-back in the 70s, most of the starting staff was brought in by free agents or trades, for sure.
Yep, Catfish, etc.
Homegrown. They had a few homegrown guys, but,
But they weren't aces, except since Guidry.
No. Guidry's the only guy, correct. Well, he was the big guy anyway. So, I don't know. And they're going to let the kids play. I mean, they moved a couple of Peraza's back up. He's going to play every day.
Yep.
IKF's on the bench. Dominguez gets moved up to AAA, which everybody's now bringing to the majors. Well, just slow down. He's 20 years old, but he's going to be a good one. And I'm glad they have not. One thing I'm happy about is they didn't panic here and think they were in this, because they never were, and trade any of these kids for Otani or anybody else. Because I think all three of these kids, Peraza, Volpe showed me enough this year. He's got to improve his contact rate a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't be striking out, 40% of the time when you're hitting 20 home runs. And Dominguez, who I think is just going to, again, prospects are called prospects for a reason. But I think this team needs to build around the young kids and Aaron Judge and kind of reboot this thing. If we got to be down for a couple of years, it's okay. I think it's okay. Just don't be boring.
See, and that's the issue, is that it's not okay for Yankee tradition.
I know. I mean, we should have done this more than once. They did it once when George went away in the 90s. When they had people forget that, it was a lot of, that's when the core 4 or 5, however many you want to count them, started to take hold, and then they filled in pieces like Paul O'Neill around them and a pitcher here and there. But it was a lot of that team was homegrown. They need to go back to those roots and get away from the 80s style of Steinbrenner-esque baseball. All-star teams don't work.
Well, they can, but it's always, if it does, it's short-lived. It's not sustainable. You've got the Orioles showing it. You've got Arizona showing it. You've got a bunch of teams that are doing the youth movement successfully. Seattle to some extent. And they show you it can work. You just have to give it time, and you got to have a good eye for talent when you make your trades and get fill your minors and build from there. And then free agents are not supposed to stock the whole team. They're supposed to fill in gaps.
Right.
So
we have a couple of prime examples where it doesn't work. I mean,
both in New York,
Padres, and the Mets. There's 3 great examples right there. Oh God! Speaking of Seattle, I mean they're playing really good baseball right now too. I was going to just, unless you got something else you want to bring up,
let's take a look at standings.
Look around the league a little bit. The AL East, Baltimore's still up there, 7-3 in their last 10. They've righted the ship a little bit. They had a little bit of a lull there for a couple of weeks, but they played very consistent baseball all year. Tampa with some severe distractions, injuries, and players doing things that we shouldn't even be thinking about doing. Holding their own, only 2 games off the pace, and we talked about the Blue Jays falling back. Obviously, the Red Sox and the Yankees. The Yankees more than the others. They get a 50% chance of making the playoffs now. Any thoughts on what we've seen here? Nothing's changed a lot in the last other weeks, except for the separation, I guess, from Tampa to the other 3.
And that's the big difference, is the separation. This was a 3, maybe 4-team race. It's looking like it's down to a traditional 2-team race at this point, because they're playing at such a high level. They're both over 600. They're the only teams in the AL over 600. And they're in the same division, which makes it fun for baseball fans.
The Blue Jays are still, as much as I kind of said, the Blue Jays have been kind of stinking it up lately, but they're still holding on to that. No, they're a game and a half, I think, behind, right? That last playoff spot.
Yep.
So, again, this will be a nice – I still think this will be a really good race. 2 games. I don't know if the Rays and Orioles have games left against each other. I don't like this whole balanced schedule thing, but you need to play more games in the division, not less. But, I guess I'm
just like when we did interleague play. It just diminishes all of the rivalries and
diminishes the All-Star game. It diminishes the World Series. It diminishes everything.
Yep.
A lot of things. So anyway, we know where we're going there. The Central, the Twins continue to lead, and by default, they're 4 games over 500. They always seem to be 4 or 5 games over 500.
Yep.
The Guardians continue to underperform as well, and if they lose this division, then Rocco Baldelli ought to be the first guy fired. Because this division is really bad, other than the Twins.
In general, both Centrals are the weakest ones. So yeah.
Yeah, at least the National League Central's gotten a little more interesting, since the Reds started playing better ball and the Brewers got their act back together a little bit. And I mean, Cubs, I keep waiting for the Cubs to collapse. Hasn't happened.
Not yet.
Let's see. The only thing I guess the Royals have lost a few games on the A's in the race for the worst record.
Yeah, they're still 4 games better though. So
It's going to be very hard for the A's to break the record. By the way, they've got 37 wins now. They'd have to go 4 and I can't do the math. 4 and 30 to break the record. They got it in them, I think. I think they got that roll in them. But by the way, they've been outscored by 301 runs. That's hard to do. That's hard to do. No matter how bad you are, that's hard to do. I mean, look at the other team. Where's the other bad team? We're even the Athletic or the Royals. That's almost twice the Royals deficit. I mean, that's very hard to do.
Yep.
And in the West, the Rangers, just when I said maybe I was wrong about the Rangers, they've lost 7 straight.
And Houston has started to play
Houston
poorly.
Hasn't taken advantage of it. They could be in first place right now, but they've gone in a tank 4-6 in the last 10. And the Mariners are taking advantage of it. Only a game back.
And the Mariners did very little at the deadline.
Yeah, they traded their closer, and that's it, basically. Well, they got a few dead bodies off their roster, I guess.
Right. Expanded the 40-man roster.
Yeah, I had said all along that I thought that the Mariners would get back in this race and it would be a 3-team tussle for a playoff spot. I think right now it's pretty set that that's a definite, but I think all 3 of these teams are going to make the playoffs.
Unless the folds continue, yes, they should.
Did the Rangers trade for the wrong guy? I mean, they should have traded for Verlander, not Scherzer. I mean,
well, everyone said that at the time, but Verlander's been knocked around a little bit too, most recent starts. And actually, Scherzer's last start or 2 have been good. So we won't know until the end of the season which one would have been the better one, but they're all being paid the same, so who cares? Some good video
of Verlander telling Alex Cora to shut the F up the other night in the Red Sox Astros game. I don't know if you caught that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, there was I don't know what happened. I'm trying to remember now. There was a play. Oh, I think there was a pitch clock violation or something. And Verlander is arguing with the umpire. Cora starts out, and he starts talking to Verlander, and Verlander just walks by and says, "Shut the F up, Alex." So, and he was a big part of that Astros coaching staff, right?
Yep.
They won the World Series, and
he was involved in the.
He was heavily involved in the awful planning of this cheating scandal.
Yep.
Still the most overrated story in the history of baseball in my mind, but that's just me. What else do we take away from this? The Astros have been resilient this year. I mean, they have not played great baseball when you watch them and you look at the numbers. It's just a great example how you can't take numbers into consideration in winning necessarily, because the numbers would say the Astros have not had a very good year, yet they're only a game out of the first place. So they're a very resilient team, and I think, look, they're the champions. You're the champion until you get beat.
Yeah, I mean, again, they haven't. You got to understand what the benchmark is. I mean, this is the Astros, and so it's not a very good year by Astro standards.
Right.
But for other teams, they'd be thrilled to be where they are. They've had injuries, although everyone's back more or less. A couple of pitchers down, but they filled them in with other pitchers. So it's weird. They just can't seem to. They'll get on a streak and then they'll slide backwards again. I think the Mariners are going to beat the crap out of both of them because they're hungry. They like that Teoscar wasn't traded. I think J-Rod is going crazy right now.
J-Rod's going nuts, and I think they got the best starting pitching in the division myself. I really do. And all young guys.
Yep.
What's interesting is I look at this as ESPN's, and I don't know how they calculate their playoff odds, but Interestingly enough, the Astros have an 82% chance of making the playoffs, while both the Mariners and the Rangers, who are theoretically ahead of them, I guess, um, have a 70% chance. So I'm not exactly sure how they do their math. I might have gone to Perth too. I don't know. I have to see if anything shows her. Yeah, check the ESPN staffers' bios. I think all three of these teams make the playoffs.
I think it's a legitimate possibility, depending upon how Toronto keeps doing.
And then you got the Rays probably with the final playoff spot. It leaves the
Yep.
Blue Jays looking from the outside, I would think. That's what it looks like to me right now, depending again on maybe the Rangers slide right out of the playoffs. That would be a horrible collapse. I see that happening with Bruce Bochy at the helm, and they got too much talent, I think, to really blow this whole thing.
I agree.
But
then again, they weren't expected to be there in the first place. So,
well, there's that. I guess they're playing with house money if you want to look at it that way. I would. Now, if I'm a Ranger fan, if Alan Perales were here, I'm sure he's freaking out right now because you don't say that. If I said to you, I always say that. If I said to you back in March, Alan or whoever, that your team would be 72-55 and a game ahead, almost heading into September, what would you say? Oh, awesome, great. But the way the season transpired, this is a disaster, right? So
yep.
We'll see how that goes.
A lot of money tied up in that team.
Yeah. The National League, the team that I still think is the best team overall in baseball, the Braves, continue to just run away with that division. Boredom is their biggest opponent right now. 99.9% chance of making the playoffs, them and the Dodgers both. The Phillies continue their up and down ways. I just never know what you're going to get in a 10-game stretch with them. 7-3 one time, 3-7, 4-6. It's interesting. The Marlins are trying to hang in there, but they haven't fallen out of the race yet. But
nope.
Hanging over their 500. Mets look like they might try to sneak in and surprise people for a little bit there, but they've taken us a little step back the last couple of nights. So.
No, that's all about Buck. Their efforts are all about Buck.
I agree. You know what? And they're playing hard. I'll give them credit for that. They are playing hard every single night, and that falls back to the manager for sure. And I like to see that. And look at them. I hope their pride says we don't want to finish behind the Nationals. Right? They're tied right now, so we'll see how it happens there. I'm going to stick with my prediction right now. Braves and Astros repeat 2 years ago, with the Astros winning this time. But getting harder to stick to that.
Yeah, especially the way the Dodgers are playing.
Dodgers are playing some great baseball. We'll get to them in a second, obviously. In the Central, the Brewers might be a season high 13 games over 500. It's got to be close to it. Playing pretty good baseball, 5 in a row, 7 out of 10. Cubs hanging close with them. I keep waiting for them to collapse entirely, but they keep hanging in there, 3 games back. The Reds have bounced back a little bit, and as another team has in the West, which we'll get to in a second. And then you got the Pirates and the Cardinals who have been out of it for a while. I think this will be an interesting September as well, because I don't think there's no way all 3 of these teams are going to make it. It's possible now if one of the Centrals gets a wild card, though. It's possible, which I wouldn't have thought early in the year.
It is. I mean, unlike the American League, where we know they're down to the most likely wild card teams with maybe one falling out, we don't know what's going to happen in Philly. We don't know what's going to happen in Miami, who made a bunch of moves. Yeah. We don't know what's going to happen in Arizona. We don't know what's going to happen in Cincinnati and Chicago, because there's no trends. So it's all up in the air in the NL for the wild cards.
I mean, that might be the most exciting race of all, is that National League wild card race, because you've got what do you have now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams, if I want to count the Padres, within 6 games of that. Of being in, and the Giants have fallen out. They looked like they were pretty solid here not too long ago. They've fallen back. The Diamondbacks have jumped back in it, kind of jumping ahead to the West. The Dodgers keep rolling. It seems we lose another pitcher, and all they do is go 8-2. Goslin's out for the year, and they just plug in somebody else. It's amazing. I think Dave Roberts is the manager of the year. I've said it a lot the last few weeks. He's done the best job in baseball, I think, keeping his team afloat. They're 30 games over 500.
Yeah, they always overlook those managers that are on winning teams because, oh, the Dodgers were supposed to be good. And, you got to peel it away and look under the hood and see, okay, there's a bunch of injuries and not just pitching. They also lost their shortstop. They lost, there were some significant losses. And here they still are. And talk about playing hard for a manager.
Oh, they must. Look at and then you look at some of these guys, and you say, well, this team isn't having a very good year either. I mean, Muncy's not even hitting 200 again, but he's still a good contributor because again, the 3 true outcomes. His OPS is really good. His on base percentage picks him up. Obviously, the walks.
Yep.
And also, another guy I got to give credit for the job he's done is Torey Lovello in Arizona, because that team is another team that could have just thrown up their hands and said, we're too young, we can't do this. And they fought back now.
Yep.
5 in a row, and they're back in the playoff hunt, which they were quickly falling out of. 6 games over again, while the Giants have been going the other way. I'm very impressed with the Diamondbacks bounce back here. I would have bet anything that they had probably given up the ghost this year.
I thought the same thing because they were just going to fall back to where everyone expected them to be in the first place. So it was similar to the Pirates early on, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is a great story." The Reds, it's a little early for them. They shouldn't be at this level yet, but it's kind of cool. It's good for baseball, And then you expect them to slide, and like Pittsburgh did, you're like, "Okay, that's fine." But nope, they turned it around.
Also, without making a lot of moves at the deadline, they brought in Sewell.
Yep.
The closer. No starting.
Yeah, the one move we said Seattle made is the one move that Arizona made.
Yeah, it's interesting that both these teams have kind of rallied a bit here, and they're doing it with, again, 2 starting pitchers. I mean, basically. So again, it's going to be fun to watch that wild card race and watch how some of the younger teams, the Reds, who I know you were much higher on than me in the preseason. I think I had them winning about 59 games. Tells you what I know. Battling with some veteran teams here as well. So it's going to be fun to watch going down the stretch. Padres, I do not think are in it. Haven't thought they were in it. They continue to be 5 or 6 games back, but they never feel like they're in any kind of race, do they?
No, I mean, it's fits and starts, mostly fits.
Yeah. No.
And again, there's the chemistry issue. We know their manager is great. I mean, so it's not his fault. So it's a performance issue by the players. And if you actually look at the box scores regularly, you'll see they never put it together. One of their stars will blow up and have a great game, but the other ones don't do anything. And they're just like, none of them ever do it at the same time is the issue. So
chemistry is always an underrated thing. And I said this even when I picked them to make the playoffs in our preseason preview show.
Yeah.
I kept using unless the chemistry is a mess. Unless the chemistry is a mess. And I said this for all winter long. If you just play the game on paper, then they'd be the best team. But you don't do that. So chemistry matters, and I hope their manager doesn't pay the cost for this because, well, maybe I should. Maybe I should hope he comes to New York because he's a really good manager, by the way. This is not his fault, I don't think, either.
No.
And then, of course, there's the Rockies, who they're just the Rockies. They're there because we got to fill out the division, I guess. I'm not really sure.
Well, I think we should let's talk about in the past 2 weeks some guys that have just blown up.
Sure.
And I think we got to start with Mookie Betts.
You aren't starting with Aaron Judge? Come on.
No, I am starting with Mookie Betts.
Only 2 games, I guess, really.
Yeah, this is 2 weeks now. The guy's batting .585 with 12 RBIs, a stolen base, and a 1.5 OPS. I mean, wow.
It doesn't get much better than that over 2 weeks.
No. Some other big names. J-Rod, who we talked about, he's batting .446, 18 RBIs.
Fire. 17 hits in was it 4 games to set a record last week.
Yep. Couple of guys on Atlanta. Shocker. Ozuna, who's hitting 458, and Rosario, who's hitting 436. Couple of old guys. Each one's driven in 15 runs. That'll help your team. Um, Here's an interesting one that I did not think would work out. Jake Berger,
Yeah.
who Miami acquired at the deadline, has only one home run, which is hysterical because they actually brought him on for power, but he's hitting 435, which is way over his grade. Um,
So he's been more of a Marlins type player than we thought the one was coming in, because we talked about it, I know, on the trade deadline show.
yep.
He didn't.
I guess they taught him the Miami way because. So, some other guys of note. Bobby Witt's gone off. I'm so glad I traded him to you in your fantasy league.
I've been meaning to send you a thank you for that. By the way.
I just had no patience, and he had a really bad first half.
He did.
But he is 385, 6 home runs, 3 stolen bases in 2 weeks. That's impressive. Charlie Blackmon, of all people, is back hitting at 375.
Charlie Blackmon.
Yeah.
I remember him in high school.
He's been playing a long time. 2 weeks he's hit 2 home runs, 2 triples, batting 375 with a 1.2 OPS.
They must have played at home those whole 2 weeks, didn't they?
No, but
No?
enough.
I like Charlie Blackmon. I think he's been a great player for a long time, and Coors obviously helped his numbers a bit, but
yeah.
he's a good player for a long time.
Yeah,
Not what he was.
speed's gone, but the power's still there.
Yeah.
That reminds me. Stone Garrett, I don't know if anyone saw the play where he broke his fibula.
I did.
And he was hitting really well, actually.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of those no-name people that, bottom feeder teams pick up, in this case Washington,
Mm-hmm.
and they try him out. The Mets are doing it with Stewart. You get these guys, it's like, we're not doing well, let's plug some guy in, see how he does. And these no-names come up, and they're great stories.
Mm-hmm.
And he was one of them, and now he's gone for the rest of the season. So that one hurt.
That's a shame.
Yeah. Albies is supposed to come off the IL, I believe. Another one of your players.
I'll be happy for that too.
So that's a little news there. What
I've been
else?
filling in with one of my other old favorites on my fantasy team, and Keith Engle Take.
That was another one of those. He's another wit, and I don't want to get into fantasy on this show,
No.
but patience is is a virtue.
Not one of mine, but yes, it is.
Mine either. And I'm not talking about some guys that had bad month. I mean, they had a bad 3 months, and people were like, oh, that's the end of them, But now Witt's taken off, and Austin Riley had a terrible first 2-3 months for the Braves, and he's taken off.
Played well. Yeah.
So both of which I had drafted and are now doing great things for other teams.
Well, it speaks well for the Braves, though, that they played as well as they did with such a bad first half out of Riley, and I feel like they had a bad first half out of somebody else that's not hitting me right. Well, half their pitching staff was hurt. I guess is what I was thinking about, and these guys are now getting healthy or being productive.
And now they are the Padre antithesis, because you're looking at Osuna, you're looking at Rosario, you're looking at Riley. These guys were not doing well earlier on, but it didn't matter because you had Olsen and you had Acuna and all these other guys that could all hit at the same time and compensate. And then, you guys, when you get around to it, we'll still be here. Mm-hmm. And now look at them. I mean, that's a team. That's a chemistry. That's the understanding that, okay, next guy's going to pick you up if you're down, type of a thing. That's why they are where they are.
And another team with a lot of homegrown talent, by the way.
Always.
With a splattering of, guys like Olsen and whatnot around the lineup. But most of them, the core of that lineup is Homegrown.
That has been their philosophy since they moved to Atlanta.
Yeah.
So
50,
yeah,
60 years ago.
yeah. It's they've always had that philosophy. They'll dip into the free agent market, but it's to fill a hole. It's not to create a team. So they're good at it, and they've always been good
I
at it.
think they might have faltered a little bit when Ted Turner first bought the team, and he brought in guys like Andy Messersmith. And if you remember, I don't know if you remember this. This was in the early days of free agency, and Messersmith was not any good anymore. I don't think at that point, but he wore whatever channel. This was before Turner was a big deal. The Superstation, right?
Right.
I think it was 17 was the name of the channel before he went. What they call
TNT.
Before he became a Superstation, yeah. And he put channel on the back of his shirt instead of his name. So, and the Major League Baseball made him take it off. Also made himself the manager for a day, which
Oh God,
he
yeah.
could not do. So Ted Turner was kind of fun back in the day when the Braves were really bad in the 70s, but obviously been a really good organization, since I don't know whenever Bobby Cox got there, right? And they've continued that pretty much
Yeah.
since.
People forget Maddox was not a Braves farmhand. They got him from the Cubs.
Cubs, yeah.
So, but again, they filled it in. And
Smoltz either. Smoltz was for the Tigers, I believe, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
That was a minor league deal, though. So, I think.
For Doyle Alexander, I'm almost positive. I mean, Doyle Alexander's been traded a lot. Was traded a lot. He's not playing anymore, obviously.
Yeah.
But he got traded for a lot of good players, and he was never that good.
No.
I never quite understood that whole dynamic, but
Potential.
I trapped myself in the past again. What else you got? Anything else?
No, I think that covers it.
Take a quick look as we get ready to wrap up. We got a couple minutes left here this weekend. Looking at some series. If you want somebody to pay you to go, I guess you can probably go to the. Let's see, what's the worst series? I like to look at that one first. Oakland and the Chicago White Sox. I guess you could pay me to go. One story we didn't talk about. Possibility that Jerry Reinsdorf is going to move the team from Chicago to Nashville. I'd be shocked. A team as entrenched in a city as the Chicago White Sox is going to move to Nashville. It's got to be a ploy to get a stadium. I don't know what the deal is. I haven't read into the story yet. I just happened to see this yesterday quickly. I got to look into that a little more. Yeah, that's the epitome of carpetbagging. If that's the case, you can't do that.
That takes you back to the 50s when teams were just flying around the country.
That one I don't understand. We'll look into more of that maybe for.
That would only leave one side of Chicago.
Right. Right. So there'd be no north and south side. It'd just be Chicago.
Right.
What else? I'm looking for some decent series this weekend. Well, you got San Diego, Milwaukee, not really. Texas and Minnesota is going to be a big series for Texas at the Twins. They need to get something going there. Cincinnati and Arizona matching off with two teams fighting in that wild card race. In Atlanta at San Francisco trying to right the ship. I don't see much else that's really all that exciting to me as far as matchups this weekend.
Yeah, the Cincy Arizona one is interesting because it's essentially two teams doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Both in the playoffs, both for wild cards, both not expected to be where they are. That's a fun one just from that standpoint of a bunch of youngins just going at it.
Yeah, if I'm up late enough, that might be a game I have to turn on to watch a little of. One of these 3 nights the next few weeks, or next 2 nights, I should say. So anyway, Drew, thank you for coming in today and giving us your insight, and which is always very insightful. If that's not redundant, I guess that's might be redundant. Listen, we're heading down the backstretch here, guys, or the what do we call it? The down the stretch. If we hit September when we see you again next week, we'll already be in September. And we're going to have some great September races and lots to talk about. We'll be back next Friday. We'll be back at our regular time, I believe, next Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks, Drew. We'll see you guys Sunday with the Stream of Consciousness. Have a great, great Friday.